Hey everyone, today we're diving into something most people don't realize until they've already lived half their lives under its control. The voice in your head that sounds like you, but isn't. It tells you you're falling behind. It mocks you when you fail. It doesn't comfort, it punishes. And no matter how much you achieve, it moves the finish line. You hear it when you look in the mirror. You hear it when you're lying in bed wide awake at 2:47 a.m. thinking about all the ways you're not enough. But here's the twist. That voice was never yours to begin with. It was installed, conditioned, passed down. You didn't invent your inner critic. You inherited it. Maybe from a father who couldn't express affection without attaching it to your performance. Maybe from a man who only praised results, never effort. Maybe from someone who thought silence was strength and anything soft was weak. And now you carry him inside your head. He doesn't shout, he whispers, and the worst part is he sounds like you now. That's how deep it goes. Because when you were young, you absorbed everything. You couldn't filter. You couldn't say this isn't true. You just accepted, adapted, survived. You built your self-image using his disappointment as the blueprint. You mistook criticism for truth. You confused silence with love. You thought emotional absence was your fault. So every time someone gets close, you flinch. You feel like a burden, like you need to earn your place, like love is a prize you haven't won yet. But let me tell you something that may sting a little. That voice in your head, it was never speaking facts. It was echoing pain. And healing starts when you stop arguing with it and start questioning who put it there in the first place. It's not about blaming your father. It's about recognizing what parts of you were built just to survive him. And from there you begin, not with a scream, but with a whisper of your own. I don't have to believe everything I hear in my head. You learned early that love wasn't something you just received. It had to be earned. It came with rules. Unspoken, shifting rules. Be quiet. Be strong. Don't cry. Be better than yesterday. Be good enough to deserve attention. You were a child learning a language of survival. One where affection showed up only after achievement. Where being seen was a rare reward, not a right. And maybe your father didn't mean to teach it that way. Maybe he was doing what he thought was best, but you felt it all the same. The cold shoulder when you disappointed him, the subtle look of shame when you failed, the silence in place of praise. You adjusted, you tried harder, you got smarter, funnier, more useful. You did whatever it took to earn the scraps of warmth. But deep down, a message rooted itself in your nervous system. Love is conditional. Love is not safe. Love can be taken away. And now, even as an adult, that message still lives in you. When someone compliments you, you question it. When someone offers help, you feel guilty. When someone gets too close, you pull away before they can see your cracks. You're still trying to earn something that should have been freely given. Still chasing a version of yourself that's finally enough. Still hoping that this time, if you do everything right, he'll be proud. But here's the truth that undoes that spell. You were never supposed to audition for your own father's love. You were just supposed to receive it. If that didn't happen, it's not because you were broken. It's because he was. Because maybe he never got it either. And this is the heartbreak that shapes you. The invisible blueprint that makes you run from softness. That makes you hustle for love. That makes you scared to rest because rest feels like weakness. But you can unlearn it. You can give the child inside you what your father never did. Unconditional presence. Unconditional patience. Unconditional love. And it starts by saying this out loud. I don't have to earn love by being perfect. I already deserve it just by being here. Shame isn't something you were born with. It was taught, trained, installed like a virus in your emotional operating system. You weren't shamed because you were bad. You were shamed to make you obedient. Maybe it was the way your father sighed when you cried. Maybe it was the way he looked away when you asked for attention. Maybe it was how he exploded over little things, spilled juice, a wrong answer, a childish mistake, and how small you had to become just to make the storm stop. And over time, that punishment became internal. You stopped expressing pain. You started hiding your joy. You turned down the volume on your own needs just to survive the noise of his disappointment. You weren't just avoiding trouble. You were adapting to danger. Because when a child feels unsafe, they don't rebel, they blame themselves. That's how shame gets in. It wraps around you slowly, makes you afraid of being seen, makes you allergic to vulnerability, makes you equate love with control and attention with performance. And then years later, you're still holding your breath in rooms where you should feel free. You still apologize when you haven't done anything wrong. You still feel like a fraud, even when you succeed. Because shame doesn't just punish your actions, it rewires your identity. It tells you who you are is wrong. But here's the truth that shame won't tell you. You didn't fail as a child. You were failed. And healing shame doesn't come from proving yourself. It comes from forgiving yourself for how you learned to survive. It comes from seeing that little version of you wide-eyed and scared and saying, you never had to be perfect. You just needed someone to stay. Because that's what you needed. Not a critic, not a coach, not a judge. A witness, a protector, a father. And even if you never had that back then, you can be that now. For you. At some point, you stopped trying to get free. You started building walls instead. Not because you wanted to hide, but because it felt safer than being seen and judged again. You built rules. Don't cry. Don't ask. Don't hope. Be useful. Be quiet. Be strong. Keep everyone at a safe distance, including yourself. And inside those rules, you felt in control. You turned perfection into a survival skill. You wore burnout like a badge. You called your numbness discipline. But let's be honest, you didn't build a home. You built a prison. One where you became your own jailer. Policing every emotion, criticizing every flaw. Chaining yourself to the same standards that once broke you. You stopped needing your father to shame you because you learned to do it for him. You internalized his voice so deeply it became your own. Now you punish yourself for resting. You flinch at softness. You attack your own reflection before anyone else can. Because if you can hurt yourself first, maybe it won't sting as much when someone else does. But safety isn't the same as peace. Control isn't the same as healing. And when you finally get tired of the inner war, when you get exhausted from being your own enemy, you might start to ask, what am I protecting myself from now? You'll realize the threat is gone, but the rules are still in place. The man is no longer standing over you, but his voice still echoes every time you try to be gentle with yourself. Here's where you begin to change. When you admit that the walls you built aren't keeping pain out, they're keeping love out. And maybe it's time to open the door. Not all the way, just a little. Just enough to let your own voice speak. Not the critic, not the coach, not the echo. Just you raw, scared, honest. And finally free. As a child, you didn't know the difference between fear and respect. You just knew when to stay quiet. When he walked into the room, everything changed. The air got tighter. Your body stiffened. You scanned his face for signs. Was today safe or not? You called it discipline. He called it tough love. But let's not pretend it was fear. And because that fear shaped you so early, so completely, you started calling it love. Because what else could it be? He was your father. And fathers are supposed to love, right? So you reasoned, maybe if I behave better, he'll smile more. Maybe if I don't mess up, he won't raise his voice. Maybe if I impress him, he'll finally see me. You started performing for peace, respecting his silence, admiring his control. But deep down, you weren't respecting him, you were afraid of him. Afraid of his disappointment, his coldness, his judgment. And here's the dangerous part. That fear followed you. It shaped your relationships. It shaped how you show up at work with friends in love. Now, when someone raises their voice, you shut down. When someone sets a boundary, you assume they're leaving. When someone says, I care about you, you look for the hidden conditions. Because fear taught you to read everything as a threat. Even kindness. And maybe the saddest part is you started treating yourself the same way. You don't motivate yourself with compassion. You use fear. You think if you don't criticize yourself, you'll become lazy. If you don't push yourself, you'll become worthless. But listen closely. You didn't grow up with respect. You grew up managing tension. Real respect is not fear. Real love does not shrink you. Real safety doesn't require you to perform. And maybe the version of your father in your mind, the one you still try to impress, he doesn't need to be in charge anymore. Because you're not that child now. And love, the real kind, won't ask you to shrink just to stay close. It's not just his voice in your head. It's in your eyes too every time you look in the mirror. You don't see yourself. You see what's wrong. Too soft, too slow, too much, not enough. You pick yourself apart before anyone else can. You find your flaws before someone else does. You've turned self-awareness into self-assault. Because somewhere along the line, the mirror stopped being a place to see. It became a place to judge. And the person doing the judging still him. Still the father who looked at you like you were never quite what he imagined. Still the man who said, "What's wrong with you?" Not always out loud, but with his eyes, with his silence, with his absence. Now you carry that look inside you. And every time you fail even slightly, you hear that tone. "You should have done better. That's not how a man acts. Stop crying." You've taken his voice and turned it into your own reflection. So, when someone compliments you, it doesn't land. When someone says, "I love you," you deflect. When someone sees something good in you, you assume they're mistaken because you don't believe it. Not because it's untrue, but because the mirror in your mind has been dirty for decades, smeared with shame, fogged with fear. But here's the thing: that mirror can be cleaned. Not by pretending the past didn't happen, but by telling the truth about it. You were taught to see yourself through someone else's disappointment. Now it's time to see yourself through your own compassion. That doesn't mean you'll always feel proud. It means you'll finally feel honest. Soft, real, human. When you look in the mirror tomorrow, just try this pause. Breathe. And instead of asking, "What's wrong with me?" ask, "What part of me still thinks it needs to earn love?" Because that's the part still hurting. That's the part still listening for footsteps, still waiting for approval. And that's the part you need to hold, not fix. Just hold. Gently, like someone you'd finally forgive. You're not here to hate him. This isn't revenge. It's recognition. You're not pointing fingers. You're pointing inward, tracing the outline of a wound that's been misnamed for too long. You've been told to honor your father. And maybe you did that by staying silent, by defending him to others, by repeating the patterns he never apologized for. But awareness doesn't cancel love, it deepens it. You can acknowledge the damage without erasing the good. You can tell the truth about the pain and still carry some gratitude for the man who raised you. Both can be true. He did what he could, and what he did still hurt you. This isn't about punishing the past. It's about stopping the cycle. Because if you don't, you'll pass the same voice down to your partner, to your kids, to yourself. That's the cost of silence. That's what unhealed pain does. It becomes legacy. And maybe he wasn't aware of what he was doing. Maybe he thought that discipline was love, that criticism would build character, that silence meant strength. But now you know better. And that makes you the first link in the chain to break. You don't need to confront him to heal. You don't need him to say sorry. You don't need him to change. You just need to see clearly without distortion. He didn't give you the tools to love yourself. But you don't have to keep using his voice as a guide. You can soften where he hardened. You can question what he accepted. You can offer yourself what he withheld. And maybe in doing so, you won't just heal yourself. Maybe you'll heal the version of him that never got the love he needed either. Not through blame, through awareness, through choice. Because now you see it. And once you see it, you're responsible for what you do with it. This is where the story starts to shift. Not because the past changes, but because you do. You stop reciting his lines. You stop defaulting to shame. You stop letting an old voice write your current life. You reclaim your voice, not the one shaped by fear, but the one formed by truth. It starts small. You catch yourself in the middle of a self-attack, and instead of piling on, you pause. You breathe. And you ask, is this really me speaking or him? That moment right there, that's rebellion. That's healing. Because healing isn't some beautiful, graceful awakening. It's messy, clumsy. It's you mid-breakdown whispering, maybe I don't deserve this punishment. And choosing to stop even if you don't fully believe it yet. You don't need to replace his voice with motivational nonsense. You just need to replace it with something real, something human. You speak to yourself the way a father should have spoken to you, with clarity, with care, with patience. Not delusion, not perfection, just permission to be enough right now as you are. And no, it won't feel natural at first. You'll want to snap back into the old script. You'll want to correct yourself, fix yourself, criticize the healing as weak. But that's how you know it's working. Because if you've been drowning in cold for years, warmth is going to feel foreign. You'll flinch, you'll resist, you'll test it. Let it stay anyway. Reclaiming your voice means rewriting the rules. You no longer have to earn rest. You no longer have to fear softness. You no longer have to treat your own heart like a war zone. You are not broken. You are not unworthy. You are not your father's unfinished work. You are your own. And now that you know that you get to decide how the next chapter sounds, let it sound like grace. Let it sound like truth. Let it sound like you. So here you are, not at the end, but at the beginning. You've spent years living with a voice that wasn't yours, a voice that judged you, pushed you, shrank you. But now, you've heard something else. A quieter voice. One that doesn't demand. One that doesn't punish. Your own. It's been there the whole time, buried under old echoes. Soft, hesitant, but still there. And now you get to make a choice. You can keep performing for a ghost, or you can begin listening to the part of you that never stopped hoping that one day someone would speak to you with gentleness. That someone is you now. You don't have to erase your father to become yourself. You don't have to hate him to heal. You just have to stop letting his pain decide who you're allowed to be. Maybe he did the best he could, maybe he didn't. But either way, you get to do better. Not just for the child you were, but for the adult you're still becoming. And when that inner critic returns, because it will, you'll know what to say. I hear you. I know where you came from, but you don't get to run the show anymore. Then, keep going. With less noise, with more breath, with a voice that's finally your own. That's all for now. The rest is yours to feel.